The great galactic empire was like a perfect cold machine. It stretched across thousands of stars. Its rules were absolute. Its order was unchallenged. For centuries it had absorbed species into its fold, teaching them the empire's way of logic and control. Humanity was a newer member. They were seen as clever, but also emotional and unpredictable. On the central imperial world of Xylos, the air itself felt heavy with authority. The buildings were made of gleaming gray metal and smooth dark stone. In the center of the capital city stood the Hall of Judgment. It was a massive circular room with a high domed ceiling. Today the room was silent except for the low hum of the energy field surrounding the trial area. 3 women stood in the center of that field. They were generals in the Empire's military. Their names were Hana, Sumin, and Mikyung. Not long ago they were heroes. They had commanded the human forces in the Battle of the Kessel Anomaly. A powerful enemy of the Empire, the Shriek, were about to break through the Imperial lines. The official order from the Imperial High Command was to retreat and protect a nearby resource planet. The 3 generals saw a different path. A dangerous one. They disobeyed the order. They used a risky, unorthodox strategy. They lured the Shriek fleet into the dangerous gravity wells of the anomaly. Then they detonated their own supply ships to create a chain reaction of cosmic debris. They won the battle. They saved the entire Cygnus sector from invasion. But they had broken a direct command. Now they were not heroes. They were prisoners. At the far end of the hall, on a tall throne made of a single piece of black crystal, sat Imperator Cathar. He was not human. He was a tall, slender being with gray skin and large dark eyes that showed no emotion. Next to him stood Proconsul Vex, a smaller, nervous-looking official whose job was to speak the Imperator's will. "The tribunal has reached its verdict," Proconsul Vex announced, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "Generals Hana, Sumin, and Mikyung of the Human Division, you are found guilty of seditious strategic doctrine. Your actions, while resulting in a tactical victory, displayed a willful disregard for Imperial chain of command. This cannot be tolerated." The generals did not react. They stood straight in their simple gray prisoner uniforms. Their faces were calm. Hana, the oldest, had streaks of gray in her black hair. Her eyes were focused on a point far away. Sumin, who was known for her brilliant tactical mind, was silently studying the patterns on the floor. Mikyung, the youngest and most fierce, stared directly at Imperator Cathar, her jaw set. "Your sentence," Vex continued, his voice trembling slightly, "is death. Execution by energy lance. The sentence is to be carried out immediately, on the orbital platform above Cygnus Prime, and broadcast to all human colonized worlds as a lesson in obedience." For the first time, Mikyung spoke, her voice clear and sharp. "This is a mistake. You are not just killing soldiers. You are killing an idea." Imperator Cathar finally moved. He leaned forward, his voice a low, cold whisper that somehow filled the entire room. "The idea is the problem. The Empire is built on order. Your idea is chaos. It is a flame that must be snuffed out before it spreads." Hana slowly turned her head to look at him. "You see a flame to be snuffed out," she said, her voice much quieter but just as strong. "But you are wrong. You are not dealing with a simple flame. You are breaking a seal on something much older, something you do not understand." Cathar dismissed her words with a wave of his long-fingered hand. "Take them away." Guards in polished silver armor approached. They led the 3 women out of the Hall of Judgment. The journey to the spaceport was a silent, solemn parade. They were placed on a stark white transport ship. The ship lifted off from Xylos and began its short trip to the orbital platform over the barren, red planet of Cygnus Prime. The execution platform was a flat, open deck under the cold light of a distant sun. The stars were sharp and clear in the airless sky. 3 posts stood in the center. The women were led to them. Their hands were not bound. They were given that last dignity. All across the human worlds, on screens in homes and public squares, people watched. There was silence in the streets of Seoul. The markets in Busan were still. In colonies light years away, families gathered around their viewers, their faces pale with shock and horror. On a remote, icy moon called Creasy, a man named Ji-hun was working in his small, cluttered laboratory. He was a historian and an engineer. He was a quiet man who preferred the company of old books and broken machines. A red light began to flash on his main console. A priority message flagged with the highest encryption level appeared on his screen. It was a live feed from Cygnus Prime. and it was a message he had prayed for years he would never receive. His heart felt like a stone in his chest. He knew what this meant. Back on the platform, Proconsul Vex's image appeared on the broadcast. He was reading the formal charges again. His voice was a dry, legal rattle. Ji-hun did not listen to the words. He looked at the faces of the 3 women on his screen. He had known them. He had worked with them in secret for a long time. They were not just generals. They were the architects of a last, desperate hope. On the screen, Hana looked directly into the camera. It seemed as if she was looking right at Ji-hun, across all the vast emptiness of space. "Soo-min, Mi-kyung," Hana said softly, her voice transmitted across the galaxy. "It has been an honor." "The honor was ours, General," Soo-min replied, a small sad smile on her lips. Mi-kyung nodded. "Tell our story." The Imperial executioners stepped forward. They raised their long, metallic energy lances. The tips of the lances began to glow with a bright, white-hot light. Hana took a last breath of the thin, processed air. She spoke one final sentence, her words clear and firm. It was not for the Empire. It was for the people watching. It was for Ji-hun. "You are not just killing us," she said. "You are unleashing the Baba Yaga." The energy lances fired. 3 beams of pure, destructive power shot out and struck the generals. There was no scream. There was only a brilliant, terrible flash of light. Then nothing. The 3 posts stood empty. The broadcast ended. Across human space, the silence was broken by a wave of grief and anger. But it was a helpless anger. The Empire was too powerful. On the moon, Kreise Ji-hun sat in the dark of his lab. The only light came from his console, which now showed a single automated message. It was from Hana. A dead man's switch activated only upon her death. With trembling fingers, Ji-hun opened it. The message was simple. There was no video, only text and a voice recording of Hana speaking 2 sentences. "The house has left its chicken legs, Ji-hun. It is time for the witch to fly. Authorization, midnight sun." Ji-hun put his head in his hands and cried for his friends. He cried for the world that was. When his tears were finished, he wiped his face. He stood up. His sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. He walked to a separate terminal hidden behind a false wall. He typed in a long series of codes. He placed his palm on a scanner. Finally, he spoke. "Authorization. Midnight sun. Activate protocol. Baba Yaga. Deep within the solar system. In hidden places. Inside a dark asteroid under the ice of a dead moon. In the silent depths of a Martian canyon, machines that had been dormant for decades suddenly woke up. They did not start building new shiny warships. Instead, they began to reclaim. They reached out with robotic arms and swarms of tiny nano-builders. Decommissioned freighters, their hulls scarred and old, were pulled into these hidden shipyards. Old mining lasers were taken apart and rewired. Planetary defense cannons, scheduled for recycling, were diverted. Civilian-grade jump drives were stacked like bricks. This was not the clean, uniform design of the Galactic Empire. This was something else. It was brutal. It was practical. It was made from the broken pieces of human industry, fused together into a new, terrifying shape. The Baba Yaga was not a weapon you built. It was a weapon you became, and now it was awake. The silence in Ji-hun's laboratory was heavy and complete. The only sound was the low hum of computers and the faint hiss of air circulating. He sat perfectly still in his chair, staring at the blank screen where the execution had been broadcast. The image of the 3 women turning to light was burned into his mind. He could still see their calm faces, hear Hana's final coded words. He did not move for a long time. He remembered Hana's sharp intelligence, the way she could see patterns in chaos. He remembered Soo-min's quiet genius for logistics and planning. He remembered Mi-kyung's fierce, unbreakable spirit. They were more than generals. They were his friends. And now they were gone, murdered to make a point. A soft, repeating beat broke the silence. It was the sound of the secure message from Hana, still waiting on his main console. He had read the text. He had heard her voice. But he had not yet acted. Acting made it real. Acting meant there was no going back. With a slow, tired movement, he swiveled his chair. He opened the message again. The text was simple. Project Baba Yaga. Status, standby. Directive. Upon confirmed death of General Hana, General Soo-min, or General Mi-kyung, Initiate final protocol authorization phrase. The house has left its chicken legs. Activation code. Midnight Sun. Ji-hun was the last custodian. He was a historian, not a soldier. He was a man who fixed old machines, not a man who built new weapons. The three generals had chosen him for that very reason. They said he understood the soul of things. He understood that Baba Yaga was not just a weapon. It was a story. It was a legend made real. He stood up. His legs felt weak. He walked to the back of his lab, to a section that looked like a storage closet for old engine parts. He pushed a dusty crate of thermal regulators to the side. Behind it was a plain metal panel. He pressed his palm against it. A scanner light glowed blue, reading his prints, his veins, his DNA. A section of the wall slid open with a quiet sigh. Behind it was a small dark room. In the center of the room was a single terminal, older than the ones in his main lab. It was a simple screen and a keyboard. This was the heart. This was the only place from where Baba Yaga could be awakened. He sat down. The old chair creaked under his weight. He typed in a long string of numbers and letters. The screen flickered to life. It showed a simple text-based menu. Project, Baba Yaga. Status, dormant. He took a deep, shaky breath. He typed the activation code, Midnight Sun. The screen changed instantly. Lines of code began to scroll down at an incredible speed. A progress bar appeared at the bottom. It was labeled Initiating Final Protocol. A new window popped up. It was a map of the solar system. 3 locations began to pulse with a slow red light. One was in the asteroid belt. One was on the dark side of Earth's moon. One was buried deep under the ice of Jupiter's moon, Europa. These were the shipyards. They were not places where new ships were built. They were places where old ships were reborn. They were junkyards with a purpose. In the asteroid belt, a large, rocky asteroid named P417 suddenly shuddered. A section of its surface, covered in dust and ice, split open. Inside, it was not rock. It was a nest of machinery. Robotic arms thick as tree trunks uncoiled from the walls. Conveyor belts, silent for decades, began to rumble to life. Lights flickered on, illuminating a vast, cavernous space. The first machine to be pulled into the light was an old, deep space freighter. Its identification number, Stellar Mule 07, was faded on its hull. It was a simple, boxy ship designed to carry ore and supplies. It was not designed for battle. Swarms of small, spider-like robots covered its surface. They moved with a frantic, coordinated energy. They began cutting. They used lasers and plasma torches to slice away the cargo containers. They stripped the ship down to its skeletal frame. Other machines were brought in. Old planetary defense cannons, powerful but too slow to hit starships, were welded onto the freighter's frame. Their power systems were ripped out and connected directly to the ship's overworked reactor. A bank of civilian-grade jump drives meant for small scout ships were stacked together and hardwired. It was not elegant. It was brutal. It was like performing surgery with a welding torch. The same thing was happening on the moon. In a deep crater that never saw sunlight, the ground opened up. An old Imperial corvette, decommissioned for being too slow, was dragged from its grave. Its sleek silver hull was torn apart. Mining lasers, normally used to break apart asteroids, were bolted to its sides. Their focusing crystals were recalibrated. They were no longer tools for mining. They were now weapons of pure, raw destruction. On Europa, under miles of ice, a facility that once processed water ice for fuel suddenly changed its programming. It began melting the ice around it not for fuel but to create a space to work. It pulled in derelict communication satellites and old orbital tugs. It fused them together into a strange asymmetrical shape. It looked less like a ship and more like a floating pile of scrap metal held together by hope and anger. Ji-hun watched it all from his terminal. The screen showed the progress of each shipyard. It showed the blueprints of the emerging vessels. They were monstrous. They broke every rule of starship design. They had too many guns and not enough shields. Their engines were unstable. Their life support was an afterthought. They were not meant for long voyages. They were meant for one thing only: a short, violent, and terrifying life. He received a communication request. It was from a pilot he knew, a young man named Jay. Jay was reckless and brilliant. He had been a friend of Mikyung. He had also seen the broadcast. His face appeared on the screen. He looked angry. His eyes were red. "Ji-hun, They're gone, Jay said, his voice tight. I know, Ji-hun replied. Is it true, what Hana said at the end? Is it real? Ji-hun nodded slowly. It is real. I have started it. What is it? A new battleship? A super weapon? No, Ji-hun said. It is not one thing. It is a fleet, but not like any fleet you have ever seen. It is made from what we have thrown away. It is our garbage, Jay, and we are going to throw it back at them. Jay was silent for a moment, processing this. Where do I sign up? He finally said. You don't understand, Ji-hun said. The ships, they are dangerous. To the enemy and to us. The life support is weak. The reactors could overload. The navigation systems are aggressive. I don't care, Jay said, his voice firm. Mi-kyung is dead. They killed her for winning a war. I will fly a ship made of paperclips and rage if I have to. Just tell me where to go. Ji-hun saw the same fire in Jay's eyes that he had seen in Mi-kyung's. He knew he could not stop him. He did not want to. Come to Kreise, Ji-hun said. Come quickly. He ended the call. He looked back at the main screen. The progress bars for the 3 shipyards were at 50%. The ships were taking shape. They were ugly. They were frightening. They were a physical representation of human desperation. He thought about the name, Baba Yaga, from old Earth folklore, a witch who lived in a house that walked on chicken legs, a creature of the forest of the old wild world, unpredictable, dangerous. She was not purely evil, but she was not good either. She tested people. She punished the proud and the cruel. The Galactic Empire thought it had killed a threat. It thought it had cut off the head of the snake. But it had not. It had merely angered the witch in the woods. It had forced the house to stand up on its chicken legs and walk. Ji-hun opened a new file on his terminal. It was the core programming for the fleet's command AI. The 3 generals had not left him with a simple computer. They had left him with a copy of their own minds, a fragmented digital ghost of their combined tactical genius, Hana's creativity, Sumin's precision, Mi-kyung's aggression. It was all there, woven into the code. He uploaded the final activation sequence. The AI was not a single voice. It was a chorus of 3. A new message appeared on his screen, its text glowing softly. Protocol active. The forest awakens. The house is walking. Ji-hun leaned back. The first part was done. The grief was still there, a cold weight in his stomach. But now it was joined by something else. A grim sense of purpose. The Galactic Empire had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about obedience. They were about to receive a lesson of their own. A lesson about what happens when you push a species too far. You don't get a disciplined soldier. You get a fairy tale monster. And the monster was now awake, and it was very, very hungry. The first ship to be completed was the one from the asteroid belt. It was called the Bone House. It was the flagship, but only because it was the biggest. It looked nothing like an Imperial warship. Imperial ships were sleek and silver, shaped like knives or needles. They were beautiful and deadly. The Bone House was ugly. It was a boxy, patched-together monster. Its main body was the old skeleton of the stellar Mules 07 freighter. But its cargo bays were gone. In their place were massive industrial plasma cutters. These were tools for slicing apart asteroids, not for battle. They were clumsy and slow to aim, but if they hit something, they would melt straight through it. 2 old planetary defense cannons were welded to its sides. Their barrels stuck out at odd angles. Its hull was a mess of different colored metal plates. Some were from old satellites. Some were from scrap heaps. There were wires and pipes exposed all over its surface. It looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Jay arrived at Kreise in a fast, small courier ship. He landed in Ji-hun's hangar and jumped out. He was a young man with intense eyes and restless energy. He walked into the lab and saw Ji-hun at the main terminal. On the screen was a live view of the Bone House. Jay whistled. That's it? That's our great hope. It looks like a flying junkyard. It is a flying junkyard, Ji-hun said without turning around. But it is our junkyard. The Empire's scanners will not know what to make of it. They look for specific energy signatures. They look for military-grade hull composition. The Bone House does not have those things. It will look like space debris to them, right up until it melts their ship in half. The rest of the fleet was just as strange. There were smaller ships made from old mining drones. They had been modified to carry high explosive charges. Their job was to fly right at the enemy and detonate. There were ships that were little more than engines and a single overpowered laser. They were fast and could hit hard, but they had no shields at all. It was a fleet of one-way trips and desperate moves. The Galactic Empire soon detected the activity. A small scout ship, the Glimmer, was on a routine patrol near the asteroid belt. Its captain was a by-the-book officer named Valis. His sensor officer spoke up. "Captain, I am reading multiple energy signatures from asteroid P417. They are irregular. They do not match any known ship profiles." Captain Valis looked at the data. The energy readings were a mess. They were low-power, chaotic. There were signatures of civilian reactors, industrial tools, and old communication systems. "It is probably just scavengers," Valis said, "or a sensor ghost. Ignore it." "But sir, the power levels are increasing, and there is movement." On the screen they saw the bone house slowly move out of the asteroid. It was not a graceful movement. It shuddered and groaned as its old engines pushed it forward. To the crew of the Glimmer it was a ridiculous sight. "What in the stars is that?" Valis said, laughing. "It looks like a pile of scrap someone welded together. Hail them. Tell them to identify themselves or be moved along." The communication officer sent the standard hail. There was no verbal response. Instead, a data packet was sent back. It was a single old Earth image. It was a picture of a crooked house standing on giant chicken legs. Valis was confused. "What is this, a joke? Target their engines. A single warning shot will make them see reason." The Glimmer fired a low-powered plasma bolt. It was meant to hit the bone house's engine and disable it. The bone house did not try to dodge. It did not raise shields. The plasma bolt hit the patchwork hull. There was a flash of light, and then the bolt seemed to be absorbed. The hull plating where it hit glowed red-hot for a moment, then cooled. "Minimal damage," the sensor officer reported. On the bridge of the bone house, things were different. There was no human crew. The ship was controlled by the AI, the digital ghost of the three generals. The AI calculated the attack. It saw the Glimmer as a single, predictable data point. The bone house turned slowly. It did not aim its plasma cutters. Instead, it fired a cluster of mining charges from a launch tube on its underside. These were not aimed at the Glimmer. They were fired into the space around it. The charges detonated, creating a cloud of superheated gas and shrapnel. It was like a shotgun blast in space. The Glimmer's shields flared, blocking the physical debris. But the cloud also scrambled their sensors for a few seconds. In those few seconds, the bone house performed a micro-jump. It was a tiny, short-distance jump that Imperial ships never used because it was too risky. The bone house disappeared from in front of the Glimmer. It reappeared directly behind the Imperial ship, so close that their hulls almost touched. Captain Valis stared in shock at his main screen. The ugly ship was gone. An alarm blared. "Behind us! It's right behind us!" The bone house did not fire its main weapons. It simply activated its massive industrial-grade tractor beam. It was a beam used for moving asteroids. It latched onto the Glimmer. The Glimmer was a small, delicate ship. The bone house was a heavy, brutish freighter. The tractor beam pulled the Glimmer backward. It slammed it into the bone house's jagged, reinforced hull. Metal shrieked and tore. The Glimmer was crushed like a tin can against a rock. The fight was over in less than a minute. On Crise, Ji-hun and Jay watched the data feed. "It didn't even use its guns," Jay said, his voice full of awe. "It used a tractor beam and its own hull as a weapon." That's insane." "That is Baba Yaga," Ji-hun said quietly. "It does not fight their war. It fights its own." The Empire did not take the loss of the Glimmer seriously. They classified it as a freak accident. They believed the Glimmer had a systems failure and drifted into an asteroid. The strange ship was dismissed as a pirate vessel or a ghost story. A few days later, a small Imperial battle group was sent to find and destroy this pirate ship. The battle group consisted of 3 destroyers. They were fast, powerful, and designed to work together. They moved in a perfect triangular formation. They found the Baba Yaga fleet waiting for them near a dense asteroid field. The Imperial commander, confident in his superior firepower, ordered an immediate attack. The Imperial ships fired volleys of disciplined, targeted laser fire. The Baba Yaga fleet did not form a neat line. It broke apart. The small explosive drone ships flew straight into the paths of the laser fire. They detonated early, creating walls of fire and distortion that blocked the Imperial targeting systems. The bone house moved into the asteroid field. The Imperial commander laughed. "They are hiding. They are cowards. Follow them in. The Imperial destroyers followed. They were sleek and fast, but the asteroid field was tight and dangerous. They had to slow down to navigate. The Bonehouse, with its blocky, rugged hull, did not slow down. It plowed through smaller asteroids, ignoring the impacts. The AI knew the field perfectly. It lured the destroyers into a narrow canyon of rock. Then, the Bonehouse stopped. It turned around. It fired its plasma cutters. But it did not fire at the ships. It fired at the large asteroid above them. The intense heat of the cutters sliced through the asteroid's core. With a soundless explosion, the giant rock broke in two. The two halves tumbled down directly toward the trapped Imperial destroyers. The destroyers tried to evade, but the canyon was too narrow. One was crushed instantly. Another was hit by a massive chunk of rock, its shields failing under the immense force. The third managed to turn around, but it flew straight into a web of laser fire from the smaller Baba Yaga ships that had been waiting at the canyon's exit. The entire Imperial battle group was destroyed. This time, the Empire could not call it an accident. A full battle group, wiped out by a fleet of junk. The report from the last ship before it died was frantic. They don't fight fair. They use the environment. They are not following the rules of combat. The name Baba Yaga started to spread through the Imperial fleet. It was no longer a joke. It was a mystery. It was a fear. Proconsul Vex received the reports in his clean, quiet office on Xylos. He felt a cold dread in his stomach. He remembered the words of the human general, Hana. "You are unleashing the Baba Yaga." He had thought it was the empty threat of a dying woman. Now he was not so sure. He went to see Imperator Cathar. "Your Excellence," Vex said, his voice nervous. "We have lost a scout ship and a full battle group to an unknown force. They call it Baba Yaga." Cathar looked up from his crystal throne. His dark eyes were calm. "It is a minor nuisance. A group of human terrorists using stolen technology. Send a larger fleet. Crush them. But the way they fight, it is strange. It is chaotic. It is human. That is why they must be destroyed," Cathar said coldly. "Their unpredictability is a disease. Wipe them out." Vex bowed and left. He did not feel reassured. He had a feeling that sending a larger fleet was exactly what this Baba Yaga wanted. It was like trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline on it. The fire only grew bigger and hungrier. The victory in the asteroid field was not a celebration. It was a confirmation. On Chrysae, Ji-hoon and Jay watched the final moments of the Imperial battle group. The data stream showed the asteroids crushing the sleek destroyers. It was a brutal, effective tactic. Jay let out a low whistle. It worked. They actually did it. It worked this time, Ji-hoon corrected him. He looked tired. The Empire is not stupid. They will adapt. They will send more ships. Bigger ships. The next fight will not be so easy. The AI, the ghost of the three generals, seemed to agree. A new course was already plotted on the main screen. The Baba Yaga fleet was not staying to defend its territory. It was moving. Its destination was not a military target, at least not a direct one. "It's heading for the Kessel Prime shipyard," Jay said, reading the data. "That's one of their biggest. It's heavily defended. We can't attack that. It's suicide." "That is not the target," Ji-hoon said. He zoomed in on the map. The fleet's course went near the shipyard, but not directly at it. It was heading for a dense cloud of cosmic dust and ionized gas nearby. A perfect place to hide. The AI is not thinking like a soldier. It is thinking like a virus. The Galactic Empire was indeed reacting. The loss of 3 destroyers was an embarrassment. The story of the junk fleet was spreading. On human worlds, people whispered the name Baba Yaga with a new feeling, hope. The Empire was not invincible. It could be hurt. Imperator Cathar was angry. His calm, logical order was being challenged by chaos. He ordered a full battle squadron, led by the heavy cruiser Judgment of Xylos, to find and exterminate this nuisance. The Judgment of Xylos was a city in space. It had enough firepower to glass a planet. Its commander, a stern veteran named Prefect Gore, was confident. He saw the reports of the Baba Yaga's tactics. He called them cowardly tricks. They hide in asteroids and dust clouds, he told his crew. They are afraid of a real fight. We will give them one. We will draw them into open space and destroy them with superior firepower. The Imperial fleet moved into position. They set a trap near a barren star system. They broadcast their location loudly, daring the Baba Yaga to attack. The Baba Yaga fleet did not come. Instead, something else happened at the Kessel Prime shipyard. The shipyard was a massive, orderly structure. Hundreds of ships were being built or repaired. Its traffic control system was a masterpiece of imperial efficiency. It guided every ship in and out with perfect timing. The Baba Yaga fleet, hidden in the dust cloud, did not fire a single shot. It launched a different kind of weapon, a data spike. It was a malicious code designed by Sumin's digital ghost. It was not meant to destroy. It was meant to confuse. The data spike slipped into the shipyard's traffic control system. It was a small, quiet invasion. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then, the system began to behave strangely. A heavy freighter, fully loaded with fuel, was given clearance to depart at the same time a new cruiser was scheduled to arrive. The navigation paths overlapped. The traffic control system, now corrupted, assured both ships that their course was clear. The result was a catastrophic collision. The freighter's fuel tanks ruptured and exploded. The explosion damaged the new cruiser and several nearby support vessels. Alarms blared across the shipyard. Emergency crews scrambled. In the confusion, the traffic control system went completely mad. It started assigning random, conflicting courses to every ship in the area. Tugboats crashed into stationary freighters. A repair dock's guidance system failed, causing a half-built destroyer to drift into the central command spire. The shipyard was not destroyed by weapons. It was crippled by chaos. It was a perfect, bloodless attack that caused more damage than a dozen bombs. When Prefect Gore heard the news, he was furious. His mighty fleet was waiting for a battle, and the enemy was elsewhere, breaking a shipyard with a computer virus. It was an insult. Recall the fleet, he ordered. We must defend our assets. The great Imperial battle squadron turned around and sped towards Kessel Prime. It was exactly what the Baba Yaga AI had calculated. As the Imperial fleet rushed back, they had to pass through the Serpent's Tail Nebula, a region of space known for its violent energy storms and gravitational shifts. Imperial navigation systems usually plotted a slow, safe course around it. But in their hurry, Prefect Gore ordered a direct route through the thinner edge of the nebula. The Baba Yaga fleet was already there, waiting. The Bone House and its smaller ships were not hiding. They were using the nebula's energy to mask their signatures. As the lead ship, the Judgment of Xylos, entered the nebula, the Baba Yaga fleet attacked. But again, they did not attack directly. The smaller explosive drones flew out. They did not head for the ships. They flew to specific points in the nebula and detonated. The explosions interacted with the nebula's volatile gases. They triggered a chain reaction, creating a sudden, massive solar flare that erupted through the area. The Imperial ship's shields were designed for laser fire and plasma bolts, not for the raw elemental fury of a star. The shields overloaded and flickered out. The ships were bathed in radiation and heat. Systems failed. Hulls glowed red. In the chaos, the Bone House moved in. It ignored the smaller ships. It headed straight for the wounded Judgment of Xylos. The Imperial cruiser was blind and crippled. It fired its lasers wildly, but the Bone House's patchwork hull absorbed the hits, its plates burning away but protecting the core. The Bone House got close. It did not fire its plasma cutters. It extended a massive magnetic claw, the kind used for grabbing space junk. It clamped onto the hull of the great cruiser. Then, the Bone House activated its powerful, unbalanced engines at full power. It pushed. It dragged the larger, heavier cruiser with it, turning it towards a nearby pocket of intense gravity within the nebula. The Judgment of Xylos was helpless. Its engines were damaged. It could not break free from the claw. The Bone House, straining every joint and bolt, pulled the Imperial flagship into the gravity well. With a final, massive effort, the Bone House released its claw and reversed its engines. The Judgment of Xylos, unable to stop, was pulled into the gravity well. It was crushed into a tiny ball of metal by the immense forces. The rest of the Imperial fleet, leaderless and damaged, retreated in disarray. The news spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. The mighty Judgment of Xylos was gone, not just defeated but humiliated, destroyed by a tractor beam and a gravity well. On the human worlds, the whispers became shouts. The name Baba Yaga was painted on walls. People who had been afraid now stood a little taller. The story of the 3 executed generals was told and retold. They were not traitors. They were martyrs. Their ghost was now a living nightmare for the Empire. Proconsul Vex went to see Imperator Cathar again. This time he was terrified. Your Excellence, the situation is escalating. They call it Baba Yaga. It is more than a fleet. It is an idea. It is a symbol. Our heavy cruiser is destroyed. Our shipyard at Kessel Prime is in ruins. We are losing not just ships, but face. Cathar was no longer calm. A cold fury burned in his dark eyes. The perfect order of his empire was being stained by this human irrationality. This Baba Yaga is a disease, Cathar said, his voice like ice. And we will burn it out. Recall every available ship from the frontier. Gather the entire home fleet. We will meet this chaos with overwhelming absolute force. We will crush them so completely that no one will ever speak their name again. Vex bowed and left. He knew Cathar was right in terms of power. The home fleet was invincible. But a terrible thought stuck in his mind. He remembered the human general's last words. You are unleashing the Baba Yaga. He had thought she was talking about a weapon. Now he understood. She was talking about a legend. And you cannot kill a legend with a laser. The more ships Cathar sent, the bigger the legend grew. The witch in the woods was no longer just walking. She was dancing. And the whole galaxy was watching. The final journey of the Baba Yaga fleet was a quiet one. There were no grand speeches. No brave messages sent to the human worlds. The ships moved through the void, a silent, jagged procession of scars and anger. They were heading for the heart of the Empire, the throne world of Xylos. On Chryse, Ji-hun and Jay watched the sensor data. They saw the massive energy signatures of the Imperial home fleet gathering around Xylos. It was an armada of thousands of ships. A wall of polished silver and focused light. It was the greatest military force ever assembled in the galaxy. Jay looked at the screen, then at the bone house. Its hull was battered. Whole sections were open to space, held together by little more than the will of the AI. The other ships in the fleet were in even worse shape. We can't win this, Jay said quietly. It's impossible. They'll destroy us in seconds. I know, Ji-hun replied. His voice was calm. He had known this from the beginning. This was never about winning a battle, Jay. It was about winning the war. The war? How does getting ourselves killed win the war? By changing the story, Ji-hun said. The Empire's power is a story. The story is that they are too strong to fight, that their order is absolute. We are going to break that story. We are going to show every single person in the galaxy that the Emperor himself is not safe, that his throne can be touched. The Baba Yaga fleet did not slow down as it approached the Imperial Armada. The Imperial ships formed perfect, disciplined lines. Their weapons glowed with power. The command ship, the Imperius, held Imperator Cathar himself. He watched the approaching junk fleet on his screen with contempt. Look at them, Cathar said to Proconsul Vex. They are nothing, a final desperate charge. It is almost pathetic. Destroy them. Wipe every last piece of scrap from the sky. The order was given. The front line of the Imperial fleet fired. A storm of laser fire and plasma bolts shot towards the Baba Yaga fleet. It was enough firepower to vaporize a planet. The Baba Yaga fleet did not fire back. It did not try to evade. Instead, it broke apart. Every ship, every drone, every piece of the fleet suddenly shattered into 1,000 smaller pieces. It was not an explosion. It was a planned disintegration. The bonehouse split into a cloud of jagged metal and burning reactor cores. The mining drones became swarms of shrapnel. The laser ships broke apart, their unstable power cells flaring like tiny suns. The Imperial volley shot through this cloud, destroying many of the pieces, but there were too many. The cloud of debris continued moving forward, carried by its own momentum. It was like a shotgun blast of scrap metal and pure energy, flying directly into the perfect Imperial formation. The Imperial shields were designed to block focused energy weapons and large projectiles. They were not designed for this. 1,000,000 tiny burning pieces of metal slammed into them. It was like a sandstorm hitting a window. The shields flared white, overloading. On dozens of ships, the shields failed. The cloud of debris kept going, slamming into the hulls of the Imperial ships. It was not enough to destroy them, but it scarred them. It blinded their sensors. It clogged their weapon ports. The perfect formation began to fall into disorder, as ships tried to avoid colliding with each other in the chaotic cloud. In the heart of the debris cloud was the core of the bonehouse. It was just the bridge and the main engines, a shattered piece of the whole. It was being piloted by the AI and by Jay. He had insisted on being there for the end. Now Jay, the AI's voice, a blend of 3 women, said in his ear, The final step. The core of the bone house ignited its remaining fuel. It was not a controlled burn. It was a suicide run. The piece of ship, trailing fire and molten metal, shot like a bullet through the confused Imperial fleet. It was aimed at one thing only, the crystalline spire of the Imperial Palace which pierced the sky of Xylos. Alarms blared on the Imperius. "They're through the line. They're heading for the planet. Stop them!" Cathar shouted, but it was too late. The Imperial fleet was in disarray. The core of the bone house slammed into the atmosphere of Xylos, its heat shield burning away. It was a falling star of anger and grief. It tore through the sky above the capital city. Down in the city, people looked up. They saw the fireball streaking towards the palace. With a sound that shook the world, the wreck of the bone house crashed through the massive crystalline viewport of the throne room. It was not a violent explosion. It was a grinding, screeching, brutal impact. The shattered hull came to a stop in the center of the room, scattering shards of black crystal everywhere. Dust and smoke filled the air. The emergency systems flickered on, casting a dim light. Imperator Cathar was thrown from his throne. He got to his feet, his fine robes covered in dust. Proconsul Vex cowered behind a broken console. The main airlock of the wrecked ship hissed open. A figure stepped out. It was Jihun. He was not a soldier. He wore a simple engineer's suit. He held a data slate in his hand. He was unharmed, but he looked tired. Cathar stared in utter disbelief. This was the great threat? This quiet ordinary man? You, Cathar spat. You are the Baba Yaga? No, Jihun said, his voice calm in the ruined silence. I'm just a custodian. Baba Yaga is the story. The story you told when you executed 3 women for the crime of winning your war. The story every human in the galaxy is telling right now. He held up the data slate. It showed live feeds from a dozen worlds. Human colonies and even some of the Empire's other subject species were in open revolt. Ships were rebelling. Stations were declaring independence. The image of the bone house crashing into the palace was being broadcast everywhere. You gathered your entire fleet to crush us, Jihun said, and we still reached your throne room. We are not a species you can control with fear. You tried to kill our spirit and you only made it stronger. You made it angry. He took a step closer. The Baba Yaga is not a weapon. It is a lesson. It is the fear you have now planted in every corner of your empire. It is the knowledge that your order is a lie. That humanity, when cornered, will stop building houses and start walking on chicken legs. We will become the monster from your nightmares and we will walk right into your bedroom. Cathar was silent. He looked at the broken ship in his throne room. He looked at the live feeds of his empire burning. He had won the battle. His fleet had destroyed every last ship of the Baba Yaga. But he had lost the war. The story of his invincibility was broken. Jihun dropped the data slate at the Imperator's feet. The legend is loose. You cannot kill it. You can only live with the fear you have created. He turned and walked back into the wreckage of the bone house. The airlock closed. There was nothing left for Cathar to do. The threat was over. The man was gone. But the words remained. In the streets of human worlds, the name Baba Yaga was now a cheer. The 3 generals were saints. The Empire was forced to pull back its forces to put down rebellions across its territory. It never regained its absolute power. The story was told and retold. The story of the 3 generals, the quiet engineer, and the witch that was unleashed. It was a story that taught a lesson to the proud and the cruel. And the galaxy would never be the same.